She was hardly ever noticed. For 9 years, nobody saw her. Nobody heard her. Nobody cared. But on one Tuesday night, this 42-year-old janitor saw something in a parking garage that would expose a $15 million betrayal. And when she finally found her voice, everything changed. Not just for her. For thousands of families who had no idea their entire futures were hanging by a thread. This is the true story of how the woman nobody noticed became the hero nobody expected. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at the invisible people around you the same way again. Stay with me, because what happens next will break your heart, restore your faith, and remind you why speaking up, even when you're terrified, even when you have everything to lose, is the most powerful thing any of us can do. This is Rosa's story, and it starts in the shadows of a parking garage where nobody thought anyone was watching. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about the day everything changed. Not just for one person, but for thousands of families. And it all started with someone nobody ever noticed. Her name was Rosa Martinez, and she was invisible. At least, that's how it felt to her. Every night at 9 p.m., she'd clock into the Sterling Tower in downtown Seattle. 60 floors of glass and steel, home to Sterling Enterprises, one of the biggest tech companies in America. Worth $12 billion. That's billion with a B. Rosa would push her cleaning cart through those shiny hallways, emptying trash cans, scrubbing floors, wiping down desks where important people made important decisions during the day. She'd been doing this job for 9 years. 9 long years. And in all that time, maybe 5 people had ever looked her in the eye and said hello. You see, when you're a janitor, you become part of the furniture. People walk right past you like you're not even there. They have their important phone calls, their serious conversations, their million-dollar deals. And you're just there, cleaning up after them, making sure everything looks perfect when they come back tomorrow. Rosa didn't mind the work itself. Honest work was honest work, her mother always said. But sometimes, late at night when the building was quiet and empty, she'd wonder what it felt like to matter. To be seen. To have someone look at her and think her voice was worth hearing. She was 42 years old, raising 2 teenagers on her own after her husband died 4 years ago. The life insurance money was long gone. This job, it paid the bills. Barely. Her kids needed clothes, food, books for school. Her daughter wanted to go to college. Rosa worked this night shift, then cleaned houses during the day, catching sleep in between when she could. She was tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that settles into your soul and makes you forget what it feels like to not be exhausted. But Rosa had something that money couldn't buy, and that exhaustion couldn't take away. She had eyes that noticed things. Years of being invisible had taught her to watch, to pay attention, to see what others missed. When you're part of the background, you witness things people don't know you're seeing. And on this particular Tuesday night in March, Rosa saw something she wasn't supposed to see. It was 11:30 p.m. Most of the building was dark and empty. Rosa was on the 3rd floor of the parking garage, emptying the trash bins near the executive parking spaces. This wasn't her usual area, but Miguel, the regular guy, had called in sick, and her supervisor asked her to cover it. The garage was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Rosa pushed her cart between the expensive cars. BMWs, Mercedes, even a Tesla that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. That's when she heard voices. Low, urgent, trying to be quiet. Rosa froze. She looked around and spotted them. 2 men standing between a black Lexus and a silver Porsche, half hidden in the shadows. One of them she recognized immediately. David Sterling, the CEO's business partner. His face was on the company website, always smiling in those corporate photos. But he wasn't smiling now. The other man she didn't know. Older, maybe 60, wearing an expensive coat and holding a briefcase. Rosa should have kept moving. Should have pushed her cart away and minded her own business. That's what invisible people do. They don't get involved. They don't see things. But something made her stop. Maybe it was the way they kept looking around nervously. Maybe it was the way David Sterling's hands were shaking as he took an envelope from the older man. Maybe it was just instinct, that feeling deep in your gut that tells you something isn't right. She stepped back quietly, positioning herself behind a concrete pillar where she could see but not be seen. Years of being invisible had taught her how to disappear when she needed to. "This is the last time," David Sterling was saying, his voice tight with stress. "After tomorrow's meeting, we're done. You get your money, I get my split, and nobody ever knows. The older man laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. Relax, David. Your partner doesn't suspect a thing. As far as James knows, I'm just another investor interested in the expansion deal. He trusts me, David said, and Rosa could hear something like guilt in his voice. We've been partners for 15 years. Then he's a fool, the older man replied coldly. In business, trust is just another word for weakness. Now, here's what you'll do. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., when you present the investment documents to James, make sure he signs the modified version. The one in this envelope. Rosa watched as David took a thick manila envelope from the older man. The numbers look almost identical, the man continued. But the account routing? That's different. Instead of the investment going into Sterling Enterprises, it comes to our offshore account first. We take our cut, then forward the rest. By the time anyone notices, we'll be long gone. $15 million, David whispered. We're stealing $15 million from my own partner. We're taking what we deserve, the older man corrected him. You've built this company as much as James has. Why should he get all the glory? This is just evening the score. Rosa's heart was pounding so hard she thought they might hear it. She pressed herself against the pillar, hardly daring to breathe. She'd just witnessed a crime. A betrayal. A conspiracy that would destroy not just James Sterling, the CEO, but everyone who worked for the company. $15 million was enough to sink the whole expansion. Enough to cause layoffs. Enough to hurt thousands of families who depended on Sterling Enterprises for their paychecks. Families just like hers. The two men shook hands and separated, walking to their cars. Rosa stayed hidden until both vehicles had driven away, their taillights disappearing down the ramp. She stood there in the quiet garage, her mind racing, her hands trembling. And for the first time in 9 years, Rosa Martinez, the invisible janitor, had to decide if her voice was worth using. Rosa didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. She finished her shift at 6 a.m., punched out, and drove home to her small apartment on the south side of Seattle. Her kids were still asleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee, watching the steam rise and disappear. What was she supposed to do? She kept replaying the scene in her head. The two men in the shadows. The envelope. The plan to steal $15 million. The betrayal of a 15-year partnership. All of it happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Part of her wanted to pretend she'd never seen anything. It wasn't her business, right? She was just the janitor. Who would even believe her? David Sterling was rich and powerful, wearing $1,000 suits and driving a Lexus. She wore a cleaning uniform and took the bus to work. If she spoke up and nobody believed her, she'd lose her job. She knew how this worked. The powerful protected their own. And people like her? They were replaceable. There were 100 other people who'd take her job tomorrow if she got fired. Her daughter, Sophia, wandered into the kitchen, already dressed for school. 16 years old, smart as a whip, dreaming of becoming a doctor. "Mama, you okay?" Sophia asked, pouring herself some cereal. "You look worried." Rosa forced a smile. "Just tired, Mija. Long night." "You work too hard," Sophia said, and there was something in her voice that broke Rosa's heart. Not pity, but understanding. Her daughter knew how hard life was. How much Rosa sacrificed. "It's okay," Rosa said softly. "Everything I do for you and your brother. So you can have better lives than I had." "I know, Mama." Sophia came over and kissed the top of her head. "That's why I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to get into a good college, become a doctor, and take care of you when you're old." After the kids left for school, Rosa tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw David Sterling's face. She heard his words. "He trusts me. We've been partners for 15 years. And she thought about James Sterling. She'd seen him around the building, the CEO. He was different from most executives. He actually said good morning to the security guards. He held doors open for people. Once, when Rosa's cart had accidentally bumped into him in the hallway, he'd apologized to her. Actually apologized, like she was a person who mattered. That man was about to be betrayed by someone he trusted. Someone he'd built a company with. And if this deal went bad, it wasn't just him who'd suffer. It was everyone. All those families depending on their Sterling Enterprises paychecks. Families like hers. Rosa got out of bed. She showered, got dressed, and made a decision. She was going to speak up. Her hands were shaking as she took the bus downtown. It was only noon, 4 hours before the meeting. She'd never done anything like this before. Never walked into a building through the front door during business hours. Never asked to see someone important. The Sterling Tower looked different during the day. The lobby was full of people in business suits, everyone walking fast, talking on phones, looking important. Rosa stood there in her simple dress and worn jacket, feeling completely out of place. She approached the security desk. The guard looked up, didn't recognize her even though she saw him every night, and said impatiently, "Can I help you?" "I need to see Mr. James Sterling," Rosa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" "Then you need to call his office and schedule one." The guard was already looking past her to the next person. "Please," Rosa said louder this time. "It's important. It's about the meeting today at 2 p.m. The investment deal." The guard's expression changed slightly. "How do you know about that meeting?" "I work here. Night shift. I clean the offices. And I saw something last night. Something Mr. Sterling needs to know." The guard studied her for a long moment. "Wait here." He picked up the phone, spoke quietly into it, then hung up. "Someone from executive security will be down in a few minutes." Rosa waited, her heart hammering. A part of her wanted to run, to leave before it was too late. But she stayed. 10 minutes later, a man in a dark suit appeared. "Ms. Martinez? I'm Brian Chin, head of executive security. Can you come with me, please?" She followed him into an elevator, up to the 60th floor. The executive floor. She'd cleaned these offices 1,000 times, but never during the day, never with people working at their desks, never feeling so exposed and vulnerable. Brian led her to a small conference room. "Wait here," he said, not unkindly. "Mr. Sterling will be with you shortly." Rosa sat down in one of the leather chairs. The room smelled like money and power. There was a view of the entire city through the window. From up here, Seattle looked beautiful, almost unreal. She waited for 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Then the door opened and James Sterling walked in. He was tall, maybe 50 years old, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He wore an expensive suit, but had kind eyes. He looked at Rosa like she was actually there, actually real, actually worth his time. "Ms. Martinez," he said, sitting down across from her. "I understand you have something important to tell me about this afternoon's meeting." Rosa took a deep breath. And for the first time in 9 years of being invisible, she used her voice. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her words coming out stronger than she expected. "Your partner is planning to steal from you. Today, at 2 p.m. I heard everything last night in the parking garage." James Sterling's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Tell me exactly what you saw." So Rosa told him. Every detail. The 2 men in the shadows. The envelope. The offshore accounts. The plan to take $15 million. The betrayal of 15 years of trust. She told the truth. And everything was about to change. James Sterling listened without interrupting. His face was calm, controlled, but Rosa could see the pain building behind his eyes. Every word she spoke was like a knife cutting into him. When she finished, there was silence. Long and heavy. Finally, James spoke, his voice quiet. "David and I started this company in my garage 15 years ago. We had nothing. Just an idea and a dream. We built everything together." "I'm sorry," Rosa whispered. James looked up at her, and she was surprised to see tears in his eyes. "Don't apologize. You're saving me. Saving this company. Saving everyone who works here." He paused. "Do you know how many people work for Sterling Enterprises?" Rosa shook her head. 4,300 people, James said. 4,300 families depending on us to do right by them. If this expansion deal goes bad, if we lose that $15 million, we'd have to make cuts. Layoffs. People would lose their jobs, their homes, their futures. He looked directly at her. "You just saved all of them." Rosa felt tears burning in her own eyes. "I was scared to come here. I almost didn't." "But you did," James said firmly. "You did what was right even though it was hard. Even though you were scared. Do you know how rare that is? Especially when—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Especially when you had every reason to stay quiet. To protect yourself. What are you going to do?" Rosa asked. James stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "That meeting is in 90 minutes. I need to make some calls." "But Rosa," he turned back to her. "I need you to do something for me. Something incredibly important." "What?" "I need you to be there. At the meeting. As a witness." Rosa's eyes went wide. "Me? But I'm just—" "You're not just anything," James interrupted gently. You're the person who had the courage to speak up. You're the person who saw the truth and refused to look away. I need you there because—" his voice caught slightly. "Because I need to see David's face when he realizes someone was watching. Someone he never thought mattered enough to notice." Rosa wanted to say no. Wanted to run away. But something in James Sterling's eyes, something honest and broken and real, made her nod. "Okay, I'll be there." The next 90 minutes moved like a dream. James made phone calls behind closed doors. Security guards came and went with serious expressions. Rosa sat in that conference room, drinking coffee someone brought her, feeling more out of place than ever. But people kept coming to check on her. The security chief, James's personal assistant. They treated her with respect, like she mattered, like her comfort was important. At 1:45 p.m., James came back. "It's time," he said. "Are you ready?" Rosa nodded, even though she wasn't ready at all. They walked down the hallway to the main conference room. Through the glass walls, Rosa could see it was enormous, with a long table and expensive chairs and screens on the walls. Everything screamed power and money. "You'll sit in the corner," James explained. "Just observe. You don't have to say anything unless I ask you to. I just need you there." Rosa took her seat in the back corner, trying to make herself small, to disappear like she usually did. At exactly 2 p.m., David Sterling walked in, carrying a briefcase and a manila envelope. The same envelope Rosa had seen in the parking garage. He was smiling, confident, not a care in the world. "James," he said cheerfully. "Ready to make history? This expansion deal is going to take us to the next level." "I'm sure it will," James said calmly. "But before we start, I want to introduce someone." He gestured to Rosa. "This is Rosa Martinez. She works here. Night shift cleaning crew." David barely glanced at her. "Okay, nice to meet you." His tone was dismissive, already turning back to James. "Now, I've got the investment documents right here. Mr. Harrison will be joining us via video call. Everything's ready to go." "I'm sure it is," James said. "Tell me, David, are these the original documents? The ones our lawyers prepared? Or are they different?" For just a second, David's smile froze. "What? Of course they're the originals. Why would you ask that?" "Because," James said quietly, and his voice was full of pain, "Rosa here witnessed an interesting conversation last night. Around 11:30 p.m. In the parking garage. Between you and Mr. Harrison." The color drained from David's face. He looked at Rosa, really looked at her for the first time, and she saw the moment he remembered. The janitor with the cleaning cart. The invisible woman he'd never thought mattered. "I don't know what she thinks she heard," David started. "She heard everything," James interrupted. "The offshore accounts. The plan to steal $15 million. The betrayal of our 15-year partnership." His voice cracked on the last word. "How could you, David? We built this together. We were friends. Brothers." David's confident mask crumbled. He sank into a chair, the envelope falling from his hands. "You don't understand. I deserved more. You got all the credit, all the glory. I was tired of being in your shadow. So you decided to steal from me?" James's voice was rising now, anger breaking through the hurt. "From our company? From the 4,000 people who depend on us. I built this company too," David shouted back. "I worked just as hard as you did. But everyone only sees James Sterling, the brilliant CEO. Nobody remembers David Sterling, the partner who made it all possible. Then you should have talked to me." James slammed his hand on the table. "We could have worked it out. Restructured. Given you more recognition. But instead you chose to lie. To steal. To destroy everything we built." Rosa sat in her corner, watching this painful scene unfold. Two men who'd been friends, partners, brothers in business, now torn apart by greed and pride and betrayal. David looked at Rosa, his eyes full of anger. "This is your fault. You should have minded your own business." And that's when something changed in Rosa. The fear disappeared. She stood up, her voice clear and strong. "My business," she said. "My business is surviving. Feeding my kids. Keeping my job. And your plan would have destroyed all of that. Not just for me, but for thousands of families. So yes, it became my business." James looked at her with something like awe. David just looked defeated. The meeting ended with security escorting David out. There would be lawyers, investigations, possibly criminal charges. A 15-year friendship destroyed in one moment of greed. But 4,000 families were safe. And one invisible janitor had found her voice. In the days that followed, Rosa's life turned upside down in ways she never could have imagined. James Sterling called her into his office the morning after the confrontation. Rosa was exhausted, having worked her regular night shift, but she came anyway, still not quite believing any of this was real. "Sit down, please," James said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He looked tired too, like he hadn't slept in days. "Rosa, I want to thank you properly. What you did, you saved this company. You saved my company." "I just told the truth," Rosa said quietly. "You did more than that," James insisted. "You saw something wrong and you spoke up, even though you had every reason to stay silent. Even though it could have cost you everything." He paused. "Do you know what I learned from this?" Rosa shook her head. "I learned that I'd become blind," James said, his voice heavy with regret. "I walk through this building every day, and I thought I saw people. I thought I was a good boss, a decent human being. But the truth is, I didn't really see anyone. Not the way I should have." He stood and walked to the window, the same view of Seattle that Rosa had stared at days before. "You've worked here 9 years, he continued. 9 years. And until yesterday, I didn't know your name. I didn't know you had kids. I didn't know how hard you worked or what your dreams were. You were invisible to me, Rosa. And that's not okay." Rosa didn't know what to say. She'd been invisible her whole life. That was just how things were for people like her. "I want to change that," James said, turning back to her. "Not just for you, but for everyone. David's betrayal taught me something. It taught me that when people feel unseen and unvalued, bad things happen. Resentment builds. Trust breaks down. And the foundation crumbles." He sat back down and looked at Rosa directly. "I want to offer you a new position. Director of Employee Relations. You'd work with me to rebuild the culture here. To make sure everyone, from the executive floor to the cleaning crew, feels valued and heard." Rosa's mouth fell open. I don't have a college degree. I'm not qualified for something like that." "You're more qualified than anyone," James said firmly. "You understand what it's like to be overlooked. You know what it means to work hard and feel like nobody notices. You have empathy and courage. Those can't be taught." He paused. "The salary would be $80,000 a year to start. Full benefits. Your own office. And I'd personally make sure your daughter gets a full scholarship to any college she wants." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. $80,000. She currently made $23,000 working 2 jobs. This was more money than she'd ever dreamed of earning. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this for me?" "Because you did something for me," James said simply. "You showed me the truth. And because I want to build a company where people like you aren't invisible anymore. Where everyone matters. Where a janitor's voice is just as important as an executive's." Rosa cried then. Really cried. All the years of exhaustion, of struggle, of feeling worthless and unseen came pouring out. And James Sterling, billionaire CEO, got up from behind his desk, handed her a tissue, and waited patiently while she pulled herself together. "Thank you," Rosa finally managed to say. "Thank you for seeing me." The changes at Sterling Enterprises started immediately. James launched what he called the Clear Eyes Initiative, named after Rosa's ability to see what others missed. Every single employee, from executives to security guards to cleaning staff, received a wage increase. But more than that, James implemented new policies. Open-door sessions where anyone could speak directly to management. Anonymous feedback systems. Regular all-company meetings where everyone was invited to share concerns. The cleaning crew was moved to day shifts and given new uniforms, better equipment, and actual respect. James made it clear, in writing and in practice, that every single person in the building mattered. Rosa's daughter, Sophia, got her college scholarship. When James handed Rosa the letter confirming full tuition to any university, Rosa hugged him and whispered, "You're giving my daughter the future I always dreamed she could have." "She already had that future," James replied. "She has you as a mother. I'm just making it easier to get there." But the biggest change was in the culture itself. People started noticing each other. Executives learned the names of the people who cleaned their offices. Security guards were greeted with genuine warmth instead of distracted nods. The invisible people became visible. Not everyone was happy about it. Some of the old guard executives complained about the wasted resources on employee programs. A few quit, saying the company had gone soft. James let them go without regret. "If treating people with dignity is soft," he told Rosa, "then I'll be soft. I'd rather be soft and honorable than hard and corrupt." The story leaked to the press, of course. Local news picked it up first. Janitor saves company from multi-million-dollar fraud. Then national news. Then social media exploded with it. Rosa became briefly famous. People wanted interviews. She declined most of them, uncomfortable with the attention. But she agreed to one, on a local Seattle news station, because the interviewer promised to keep it simple and honest. "What made you speak up?" the interviewer asked. Rosa thought about it carefully. "I thought about my kids," she finally said. "I thought about all the other parents working at Sterling who have kids too. And I realized that staying silent wasn't protecting me. It was putting everyone at risk. Sometimes you have to find your voice, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." The interview went viral. Rosa's simple words struck something deep in people. Within weeks, other companies started their own versions of the Clear Eyes initiative. Workers across the country felt empowered to speak up about problems they'd been too afraid to mention. One voice had started a movement. And that voice had belonged to someone the world had trained to stay quiet. 6 months passed, and Seattle moved through spring into summer. The Sterling Tower still stood tall over the city, but something fundamental had shifted inside its glass walls. Rosa Martinez sat in her new office on the 58th floor, looking out over the same view she'd once seen from the conference room. But now it was her view. Every day, her office had her name on the door. Director Rosa Martinez. She still couldn't quite believe it. Her job was everything James had promised and more. She spent her days listening to employees, solving problems, making sure people felt heard. Sometimes the issues were big, workplace safety concerns or unfair policies. Sometimes they were small, someone needed a different shift to care for a sick parent, or the break room coffee was always cold. Rosa treated every concern with the same respect, because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to have problems nobody thought mattered. Her kids were thriving. Sophia had been accepted to 3 universities and chose UCLA. She wanted to study medicine, just like she'd always dreamed. Rosa's son, Carlos, was doing better in school, less worried, more focused, now that he didn't have to wonder if they'd have enough money for rent. Rosa still couldn't believe how much her life had changed. Sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night, panic-struck that it was all a dream, that she'd still be that exhausted woman pushing a cleaning cart through empty hallways. But it was real. All of it. One afternoon in July, James knocked on her office door. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always," Rosa said, gesturing for him to sit. James settled into the chair across from her desk. It still felt strange sometimes, having the CEO sitting in her office. But James had made it clear. They were partners in this mission to change the company culture. "I wanted to show you something," James said, pulling out his phone. He showed her an email. "This came this morning, from the Parker Corporation." Rosa read it. Parker Corporation was one of Sterling's biggest competitors. The email was from their CEO. "Dear James, I wanted to reach out personally to tell you that your Clear Eyes initiative inspired us to look at our own company culture. We've implemented similar programs, and the results have been remarkable. Employee satisfaction is up, productivity is up, and most importantly, people feel valued. Thank you for showing the business world that profit and humanity aren't opposites. They're partners." Rosa looked up, surprised. "They're copying what we did." "Lots of companies are," James said, smiling. "That thing you said in the interview, about finding your voice even when you're scared, it resonated with people. Workers across the country are speaking up more. Companies are listening more. You started something, Rosa. Something important." Rosa shook her head, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just told the truth. That's all. That's everything," James replied. "Rosa, can I tell you something personal?" "Of course." James was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When David betrayed me, it broke something inside me. We'd been friends since college. We built this company together. I trusted him completely." He paused. "But you know what hurt more than the betrayal itself? It was realizing why he did it." "He wanted recognition," Rosa said softly. "He wanted to be seen," James corrected. "And I didn't see him. Not really. I was so focused on the company, on growth, on success, that I forgot to see the people around me. My own partner felt invisible, so he turned to crime. What does that say about me as a leader?" "It says you're human," Rosa said. "And you learned from it." "I learned from you," James said. "You showed me what real courage looks like. It's not about being powerful or rich or important. It's about speaking truth even when your voice shakes. Even when you have everything to lose." He smiled. "I've been thinking about my legacy lately. When I'm gone, what will Sterling Enterprises stand for? And I realized I want it to stand for what you taught me. That every voice matters. That every person deserves to be seen. Rosa felt tears prickling her eyes. That's beautiful, James. I'm putting it in writing, he said. Our new company mission statement. At Sterling Enterprises, we believe that every voice matters, from the executive floor to the foundation. We build our future on respect, honesty, and the understanding that our greatest asset isn't our technology or our profits. It's our people. He looked at Rosa. Does that sound okay? Rosa laughed through her tears. You're asking me? You're the director of employee relations, James said with a grin. And more than that, you're the conscience of this company. So yes, I'm asking you. It's perfect, Rosa said. Later that evening, Rosa stood in the now empty lobby of Sterling Tower. It was 9 p.m., the time she used to clock in for her cleaning shift. She watched the night crew arriving, greeting them by name, asking about their families, making sure they felt seen. One woman, new to the job, looked at Rosa with awe. Is it true, she asked shyly, that you used to work night shift like us? And now you're a director? It's true, Rosa said gently. How did you do it? Rosa thought about the question. How did she do it? She didn't have a college degree. She didn't have connections or money or power. She just had one moment where she chose to speak instead of staying silent. I paid attention, Rosa said finally. And when I saw something wrong, I found my voice. That's all. Anyone can do that. The young woman nodded, something hopeful lighting up in her eyes. Rosa left the building and walked out into the warm summer evening. The Seattle sky was turning pink and gold with sunset. She thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the courage, the change. She thought about David Sterling, who'd felt invisible and turned to crime. She understood that feeling more than most. The difference was, she'd found a different path. Not revenge or greed, but honesty. Rosa pulled out her phone and called her daughter at college. Hi, Mama. Sophia answered, her voice bright and happy. Hi, Mija. Just wanted to hear your voice. How's school? They talked for 20 minutes about classes and new friends and dreams for the future. Dreams that were actually possible now. When Rosa hung up, she stood on the sidewalk outside Sterling Tower and looked up at the 60 floors rising into the sky. Lights were still on in some windows. People working late, building futures, supporting families. And Rosa knew something with absolute certainty. She mattered. Her voice mattered. Her truth mattered. She'd been invisible for 9 years, but invisibility isn't permanent. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage to step into the light. One moment to speak up. One moment to remember that you matter, even when the world tries to tell you that you don't. Rosa smiled and started walking home. She had a family waiting, a future that was bright, and a voice that would never be silent again. Because she'd learned the most important lesson anyone can learn. That the smallest voice can change everything. If only you're brave enough to use it.